Hi, we've reached the end of January and the sun's shining. So after some of the cold weather we've had, it is nice to see a bit of sun. So the second half of the month, I've read 7 books. These are some of the physical copies that I've got. And so let's see what I've read this for the second half of the month. I started off with Reindeer Hunters, which was a second one in a trilogy, which I didn't realise it was a trilogy until I picked it up. The first one I'm going to have to pick up because I want to know what happened first. And the third one, I don't think the third one's been published yet. It's set in 1903 in Norway, and it is the story of Hans, who's lives in virtual poverty with his adopted parents, and he's a hunter. He hunts reindeer, and one day he meets Victor, an Englishman, and it's the story of their relationship. In the village where he lives, the pastor, Kai Schweigard, he looks after the grave of Hans' mother, Astrid, who died giving birth to Hans and his twin brother. Kai was told that the twin and Astrid both died. And it's the story of the relationship between Victor and Hans, and it's also Kai's quest, because there's a lost tapestry. Hans' ancestors were conjoined twins, and in the 1600s these conjoined twins wove this tapestry, the hencup weave, and it's the story of him trying to find this, and it's a story of love and bitterness and sorrow, courage. It covers First World War, Spanish flu, and the advent of electricity to this little rural part of Norway. I enjoyed that one. I enjoy that one a lot. The next one was this one, Silence of the Chagos Islands. And this one is a fictional account of a real life event. I found out about the Chagos Islands when I read the Goldsmiths Prize winner this year, Diego Garcia, and came upon a shocking piece of history when a whole community were deported just so that an American airbase could be built on their island. And this is a fictional account of these people, and it's a sad little novella, and it describes sort of almost the contrast between the life they had and the life they've now got now. And yeah, it's a short read, but it's a very sorrowful read. The next one was a NetGalley ARC that comes out in March, that 2nd of March, and it's Good House for Children by Kate Collins. Now this is a creepy ghost story with 2 timelines. You've got Lydia in the 1970s, who is a living nanny for Sarah and her children. And in present day, you've got Ola with her husband Nick and their 2 children. And the central character in this is the house, the Reeve, which is this rambling place in Dorset, isolated, overlooking the sea. And the house is almost a character in itself. The house has got a history. The villagers talk about the Reeve, this house that's cursed. There's so many secrets about it. And you, as the reader, can see the patterns between what's happening with Lydia and what's happening with Ola. And you can recognise what's going on. It's a slow start. The start begins to build up the families, and then you get the creepiness coming in. And the second part, I prefer the second part to the first part. I thought it was a slow burn, but it is a really, really creepy read. Then I read this one. I had such fun with this. This was lent to me by a friend. lessons in chemistry. It's going to be a book that divides opinion, because I know I've seen from reviews some people love it, some people just don't get on with it. But I adored it. I thought it was funny. I loved the character of Elizabeth Sott, who's this chemist in a man's world in the 1950s, 60s. And she goes as an unmarried mother, and she becomes a TV star, the head of a cookery program, which mixes chemistry and food. And I thought there are a lot of humorous parts in here. There are some very dark parts as well. There's trigger warnings in here for rape, but and I think the humour shone a torch on the darker sections just to emphasise them. The characters in here, along with Elizabeth, they're great characters, and the dog. You will fall in love with the dog, 630. That's his name, 630. The dog. You will adore him. He's wonderful. I laughed out loud at that one. Then the next one was a YA debut, and it's another NetGalley arc. Again, it comes out on the 2nd of March, and it's Catfish Rolling, and it's mixes myth and grief. Sora, our main character, is part Japanese, part Canadian, and she doesn't really feel that she fits in anywhere. The story begins with an earthquake when she's in Japan with her family, and it's an earthquake that doesn't break just the land, it fractures time. And you've got an almost dystopian feel about this, because there are pockets of time, there are zones where time slows down, there are zones where time speeds up, and there are zones where time's normal. And her father studies these zones. He works for a company that is studying these zones, and he takes Sora with him, although he shouldn't. And the descriptions of these zones are wonderful, where everything's slowed down or speeded up. But Sora is searching for her mother. She lost her mother in the earthquake, and she's convinced that her mother is in one of these zones somewhere. So it's the story of Sora's grief. And you've also got the myth of the catfish, because the story is that below the oceans there's a catfish that's weighed down by a rock. But every now and again the rock moves, and so the catfish starts rolling, and then you get the earthquakes. Lots of nature in this as well. There's a real love of nature in this book as well. That is a really good read. Then the next one I read was this one. I picked it up in Toppin and Company when I was in Edinburgh in December. And this is a nice, quirky little Icelandic read. It's translated from the Icelandic. And we've got an unnamed narrator who is on a road trip with her friend's 4-year-old son, who's a deaf mute. In one day, our narrator was dumped by her husband and her lover, and she won a lottery. Not one lottery, but two. She won a house, and she won 44 million. So she's off on a road trip to find this house with this little boy who's in her care because her best friend's in hospital. And it's the story of their road trip, and it's really bizarre and really quirky, and that is such good fun. And the final book I read was a really shocking one, Mother's Day by Abigail Burdess. It comes out in 2nd of March again, and it's the story of motherhood gone wrong. We've got Anna, who's pregnant, who goes to search for her birth mother, who abandoned her in a handbag when she was born. And it's the relationship with her mother. And it is shocking, it's bizarre, it's crazy, and very dark. And so that is that one. So in January, I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I read 14 books in January. I had 1, 2, 3, 5 stars in January as well, which is pretty good going. But my book of the month has to be this one. I read this in the first half of the month. It has to be Stoneblind by Natalie Haynes. This was such a wonderful read, and you really got to know Medusa as portrayed by Natalie Haynes. She gave you a real woman, not just a gorgon. And I adored this. This is my book of the month. So I hope February is just as good as January has been. There's only 28 days, so I'll have to do a lot of reading if I'm going to read 14 books again. So have a brilliant month, and I'll catch you next time when I've read a few more books, and I'll talk to you about them. So happy reading. Take care.